What was your reaction to this rain delay that took place yesterday in the Nats Braves game? 3 hours 15 minutes, and it barely rained. It certainly didn't rain for the first 2 hours of that delay.
It's the second time this has happened. Okay, second time that this has happened where they play chief meteorologist and are wrong, like by a mile. And the first one happened earlier this year in a game against the Orioles, and people were very upset because that's a draw here. You know, this Beltway series, a lot of the people who grew up in Washington grew up Orioles fans too. So there's an interesting draw to that interleague series, and they were here. And there was a similar situation where the forecast was touch and go. They didn't know when the storms were going to come through. That's not, Alexa, you know, that's not, Michael, you know, because you guys lived here. It's not rare for this area. The weather changes. Like, no one ever gets the forecast right. They're never right. Like, they'll tell you it's going to snow 3 inches, it snows 10. They tell you it snows 10, it snows 3. So that's what happens here. And so these storms, I don't know what it is here, but the patterns change very quickly. And they had information thinking that it was going to rain in this Orioles game, and it didn't. And Buck Showalter, you know, and this back and forth thing happened between the Orioles and Nationals, where there was an accusation that the Nationals used the weather to get out of a bad pitching matchup that day. That Dylan Bundy was on the hill for Baltimore, and the Nationals had a very struggling Joe Ross at the time, and they just didn't. They used it as an excuse because the home team has a prerogative to get away from it, which they flatly denied. And then there was a lot of finger pointing and screaming and yelling and all that stuff. Last night, there's no excuse like that other than they decided to pretend to be Jim Cantori and clearly are not. So, you know, it was like, it's ridiculous. And I would hope, listen, I'm just looking from a fan's perspective here. What they did to the fans last night was abominable. You know, like that cannot be fair, you know, to ask people to stay that late. The Metro closes here, which is the public transportation. It closes at 11. So any person who stayed there who wanted to stay more than an inning or two, or who actually stuck around and did this, had no public transportation to get home last night. It was pretty bad.
That was one of the best things last season, when the postseason, when the games were going to run over, they were suggesting, the Metro was going to close, they were suggesting people literally on the team website, it was suggesting people bring inline skates, meaning like rollerblades, to the ballpark, and that's how you can get home.
Or they extended the run of the Metro another hour.
But
they did last year during the playoffs. They would put up on the scoreboard hey, the Metro's going to close in 45 minutes. Meantime, the score of the game is 4-4 in the second.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like, here, you know, do you want to walk home or try to get an Uber with 50,000 people at the same time, or do you want to actually see this 4-4 playoff game in the 8th inning? You know, it's up to you. Your choice.
Well, the Metro and traffic has always been a disaster down there in D.C. The bullpen hasn't always been a disaster, but this season is a little bit of an exception. I mean, Bram, when does it actually start mattering that the bullpen is a disaster with this 8.5-game lead in the division?
Well, this series is actually interesting because they've been skating here. Their division's been a joke. And they've been skating here, and they have this massive flaw. And it still doesn't change the fact that they're at least 8 games up and have been more than that for the bulk of the season, for the last month and a half. So it hasn't mattered yet. And that's why this series is interesting, because they're going to go into the All-Star break. They lost last night in this ridiculous rain game. If somehow Atlanta wins 3 of 4, you know, and they cut into the lead a little bit and just put a minor scare into the Nationals, then maybe they will feel the necessity to go do something. But I think they have just had the luxury of being in a really bad division, that they are overcoming a massive deficit with their offense and their starting pitching at times. And they're just saying, well, nobody's within striking distance of us, so why should we overpay? Why don't we wait until the trade market actually opens? And they are going to be active buyers, and it's not going to be one arm. It's going to be multiple arms to try to take a run with this team. And then there's the other issue of they've had a couple of major injuries occur. And so I do wonder, being that their bullpen is ineffective and incapable of leading them to where they want to go to, if a couple of hiccups occur again, because they've lost Trey Turner now till probably September, maybe later, depending how long it takes his wrist to come back. Adam Eaton's probably not coming back. If they have a couple more injuries, they just have some bad luck like that. I do wonder if they go, listen, it's just not in the cards for us, And have at it, boys. See you in October, and good luck with what we have because we're not going to give up all of our prospects. Now, if Turner's going to come back on time, they're not going to get Eaton back, but if Turner's going to come back on time and they still have this lead and their team is intact and Scherzer and Strasburg are doing what they've been doing this year and Harper's having the season he's going to have, I trust Mike Rizzo is going to go out and get what they need to the best of his ability. The big complaint is everyone knew this should have been done in December. It wasn't taken care of in December, and that's why people are angry right now. But they've had such a weak division that they've had the good fortune of sitting there not being forced to do something they don't want to do. They can wait until the market actually opens and become a normal buyer, not a desperate buyer.